Today we are going to get our hands a little dirty with code. I have a lot to show you. I'm going to be spending 4 videos doing that over the next 2 weeks. And it's going to be a combination of me looking through some, looking through some of these prepared slides, and then also using the code in real time and demonstrating for you how to get things done. So we are going to just jump in here, and first of all, I want to give you just a tiny bit of background on the language that we're using. I used to spend a lot longer kind of talking about different code languages and what code languages were good for what certain things, and which were bad for other things. And I think you can certainly find information like that on the internet. I think what we're doing is we're using, for those of you who are in computer science, this will probably make sense. We're using a set of JavaScript libraries that are geared towards teaching people code in a visual context. So what that means is we're basically working in JavaScript. It's a variant of JavaScript called p5.js. And within this class, we're able to use p5.js within an HTML window. So it's going to appear in a browser. You can also, there are all sorts of other ways that you can use this code, but because we're only spending 2 weeks on it, we're going to be working with this sort of browser-based environment. So let's jump in. So I have these PowerPoints that are kind of set up to basically walk you through some of the basic functions of this language. If you already know how to code in JavaScript, you definitely will have a leg up. If you don't know how to code, this process is actually designed for you. So it's nothing to worry about if you've never coded in your entire life. So today we're going to just talk about the most basic basics. What are some of the basic rules of p5.js? What is the order in which our statements are executed? Or for that matter, what is a statement? What does being executed mean? And we're also going to think about how does P5 handle basic shapes. So we're going to start to make some drawings. So let's start by talking about kind of what is in a sketch. And when I do these demos, I promise I will cover everything in these demos. But I may not do it in the order that the slides are in. The slides are really more things for you to use for reference when you're trying to figure things out, outside of the video demo. They're also, the slides are tools for you to use for the final exam. So if I skip a slide, it does not mean that you may not be held accountable for it for the final. So just fair warning. So we have sort of basic syntax and structure. And what does that even mean? Well, there's a certain form that you need to follow in order to make your code legible to, in this case, the interpreter, which would be the web browser. And so we are actually working in this little environment called editor.p5js.org. You can log in to this system with your Google account if you wish. And then we get what is a nice little thing called an IDE. And it all functions within a web browser. I'm going to pause for just 1 minute, one quick minute, and I'm going to show you a different way of doing it that's a little bit more advanced, just to kind of show you the spectrum of things that you can do with this language. Okay, so this is the source code for an app, an iOS app that I made several years ago, and I just wanted to, I made I think 2015, 2016, and I just wanted to kind of show you all, you know, like what the difference is between, you know, something that has some simple shapes and something that, you know, has like a full interface with all kinds of, you know, functionality, is pulling multiple data sources like weather data. If you're interested, just look at my website. It's called Rainfall, and that was one of the larger projects that I worked on as I was you know, going out for tenure. So in any case, it's written in a variant of Java p5.js that's actually called processing.js. So it's that language's predecessor. And as you can see, there's just tons and tons of code. The sort of code base, and one of the reasons that I'm kind of sharing this with you is that, you know, it took me years to build up a code base that was large enough to account for, you know, animations, an interface, data interactivity, data visualization. It also, this particular app also kind of makes synthetic poetry. So that kind of like full-featured, you know, experience takes a hell of a long time to work on, and it takes a lot of code. What we're doing right now, which is on a kind of micro scale compared to, you know, a software project or an app project, is something that is the creative code community calls sketching. Meaning that it's a way for you to start kind of building up a code base in visual forms. So I'm going to start by kind of explaining how the IDE works. The IDE is just a jargon. It's called an integrated development environment. And this is the most extremely simple IDE that you may ever see in your life. But it is technically an IDE nonetheless. So what you can do in this environment is you can, first of all, log in. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do that myself here and use my Google self. I've got all my good stuff on my Meg Mitchell account. And this is sort of the your opening code. This is what p5.js gives you to kind of seed the form and structure of your sketch. So if we come up here, I'm going to just tell you what these bits are. So this chunk right here, from curly brace to curly brace, and the setup with the empty parentheses, also the word function, is called a function. And we're going to be learning about functions later. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining them to you right now, because they're a little bit more advanced than what we're going to start off with. So inside this function, this one happens to be called the setup function. So that might give you some idea of what it does. That's kind of a typical convention in code, is that, you know, the word of the function is also a description of what it does. So this function happens to set up sort of the visual parameters of the sketch. So it does this right now by using only one function call within it. So the function call is called createCanvas. And right now it's got two values in it. It's 400 and 400. And this is not just any function call, but this is also a statement. And so you know that it's a statement because it has this curly brace right here. Sorry, semicolon. It's a semicolon at the end of a statement. Woo! And then we also have another function down here called the draw function. And we have a statement inside of it called background. And it looks like background has some kind of an argument or a value, numerical value, inserted in there. We'll look into that in a second. And like our other statement up here, this statement also terminates with a semicolon. Now, you can actually get away with a lot. I was going to say murder, but maybe not murder. But you can get away with a lot in this IDE. In other words, you can do things that are technically wrong, and they will still appear the way you want them to. So let's test that theory before we go any further. So right now, I'm going to press the play button. Okay. Create canvas 400 by 400. I'll give you a hint that is referring to 400 pixels by 400 pixels. So, and then also the background right now is 220. So the default for p5.js and web browsers in general is RGB color. So if we think back, like kind of like rack our brain and think back to when we were working in Photoshop, the range of RGB color in Photoshop, you may recall, was 0 to 255. So I'm going to do something right now which is called a comment. And that is, I'm just going to say 0 to 255. Now, by making this into a comment, what I'm doing is I'm basically leaving myself like little crumbs. I like to think of comments as crumbs. And if if we check out like my app, for example, just as like a kind of real world example. Oh, come on. Sorry. You can see that there are, lots of comments here. And some of the comments are just explanations to me or one of the other programmers that was working with me on this to sort of say, what on earth does this do? Because we may not remember by looking at the actual code. So comments are really quite critical, I think. And anytime that I sort of get mad at myself as a coder or as a programmer, it's usually because I did not leave myself enough comments. And then I go to use the code 2 or 3 years later because I want to do something with it. And then I am looking at it and I'm like, oh my God, I hate myself. Why did I make this so hard? When all I had to do was just leave myself a couple of hints. So we can leave a note to ourselves that this will accept values from 0 to 255. Now you may be asking yourself, well, how do we know that for sure? And the answer is, I'll show you in a second. But first, let's try just changing this value. Let's change it to 0 and see what happens. Now, you may notice that it kind of magically changed. That's because we have the auto refresh button enabled. I prefer, in most cases, to have this disabled. You may decide that you like it, but I like to have a little more control over when I know those changes are taking place. So, okay, so let's see. 0, okay, that's great. And then let's go for maybe 230, because looks like if we make it white, it's probably not going to show up at all. So that's a light gray. Well, that's just wonderful. What if we want to do some other things with the background? How would we know what to do with the background? Do we just like put in, some stuff I want? Absolutely not. That's not, no. If you want to know how the background function works, give the reference a try. So the reference is really like, for any language or any code, the reference is literally the Bible, or, you know, whatever other sacred text you might be thinking about. So it just so happens that there's an entry for the background function. And it kind of breaks it down in a bunch of different examples. It shows you the 500 might be an exaggeration, but it shows you the dozen ways that you can use the background function. And then it gives you a nice description, and then it gives you, this is usually what I go for, the sort of like shortcut method to what's acceptable. And so in this case, the background would be gray, and then this is like an alpha value. So within this kind of syntax breakdown, if it says background, let's say color, you can then look at parameters and, you know, find out, well, what do they mean by color, or what do they mean by A? And so you can kind of move through that. The sort of definitely the easier way to look at it is to think about using the examples. And so we can certainly say, okay, well, this is basically the zone that we're working in right now. In other words, we have a grayscale integer value that's just going from black to white. We could certainly, it looks like, change it to RGB integer values very easily. And then we could also potentially use some other color modes, which we're going to get into later in the class. So let's go ahead and take our background and give it a little bit more pizzazz. So let's see, blah, blah, blah. And so that gives us kind of a nice red. I think I'd like to actually add even more blue to this. So that gets us more of a magenta, which is excellent. And at this point, I've kind of changed the way that I'm using this function, so I might want to update my comment to kind of reflect what's going on, which would, you know, just add the fact that it's RGB and 0 to 255. And so I could come back to this at any point and say, wow, that's cool, thanks. Okay, so now getting back to, you know, any other sort of like just changes that we could think about making right now, I would certainly think about making the canvas a little bit larger. And so, you know, depends on your laptop screen. It depends on, I mean, right now I have my laptop screen at a fairly low resolution because I'm capturing video. So this is going to be about the maximum scale that, that I'm going to be able to get, but you could probably get much larger yourself. And now, where do we go from here? Well, we have the setup function, and we have the draw function. The setup function is basically running once when our program starts. So I can confirm this for you. How can I confirm it, you may ask? Well, I can print something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print the word setup. And you can see that it pretty much only ran once. Like I can't, and it put it down here in the console. Okay? So the console is probably the most overlooked aspect of pretty much any IDE. If you want to know what's going on in your code and you can't see it on the screen, print it to the console. It will tell you. It will tell you things. So let's try doing the same thing for the draw function, okay? So I'm just going to grab this. And by the way, cutting and pasting is religion in code and programming. And the reason is because when you cut and paste things, it eliminates errors. So that's not to say that you're not changing things and, you know, retyping things, but cutting and pasting actually as much as you can is a really great way to help your code not have as many silly syntax errors. So now I have the draw function, and the draw function should just be printing draw. So let's see what happens now. Oh, okay. Interesting. So, by the way, and we'll kind of come back to this print function, you can, what's inside of it here in quotes is called a string, which is sort of a computer term for word or collection of characters, string of characters. But in this case, we're just, we have to make it a string in order to, by putting quotes around it, in order to print it to the console. So we could also, print another thing which would be interesting to me. We could print the frame count. So I have this like terrible habit, by the way, where I try to reload the web page rather than hitting the play button because it's just reflex from years of being a web developer. So we'll just have to put up with that. Sorry. All right, let's see, frame count. Let's see how long we can put up with this. It's getting up there. So I guess my question for you is, when is that number going to stop growing? The answer is, I guess technically the correct answer is never, or until you stop the sketch. As long as it is running, it is going to be adding frames. So the good news about some of that is, I know it used to be when I was studying programming early on, I used to be terrified that I would make some never-ending loop. And the p5.js environment kind of fundamentally is a never-ending loop. The draw function, unlike the setup function, which you can see, we can scroll through all this data, not quite to the beginning, but the setup function, as we saw, only runs once. And after the setup function runs, the draw function runs forever. I know forever is a mighty long time. So, you know, it runs until you tell it not to, basically. So let's sort of think about maybe not having these things kind of activated right now, because I don't think that it's necessary if we move forward. Just wanted to kind of prove a point. So I'm going to comment them out, which is a way of, especially when you're developing or writing or, you know, sketching, it's a way of disabling your code without deleting it. As you may have noticed after, like, you know, 15 weeks of studying with me, I like to change my mind a lot. So, actually, commenting is a great way to do that in code. So I'm going to go ahead and come into these two lines. I'm going to use a shortcut key. I'm using Command command // let me try that one more time. Command // yes, I just didn't have the window activated. By using command // I'm basically kind of disabling these two lines. So you can put a comment after a line, you can put a comment above or below a line, and you can actually just take code and comment it out. And that sort of command // is a pretty great technique for commenting out chunks of code, because you can also do it the other way. If we were to now come in here and say, okay, command // it brings it back. So, okay, so right now we have this crazy magenta background and the word setup. Pretty much it. I think I'm going to go for an even, like, crazier, more purple magenta. Okay, and so we're pretty much now at the point where we have to think about drawing some shapes in here. So if I want to draw some shapes, I usually start with an ellipse, because it's just kind of like the easiest, most basic shape to use. So let's try making an ellipse. Of course, I do happen to have this kind of memorized for the most part. You know, I know what to type in there, but if I were you, I would certainly go to the reference. So if I look at the reference page, I'll just show you what it looks like. There's a section on shape and 2D primitives. So these are all different 2D shapes that you can use. Let's try ellipse. And it looks like, there it is. It's four values that you have to put in there. And it looks to me like the ellipse syntax is basically the x-coordinate, the y-coordinate, the width, and then the height. You can omit the height if you want to make it round. So you can also, there are some other parameters that we're not going to be using just yet. We'll be doing WebGL stuff at the end of this unit. So x, y with height, got it. X, y with height. So it's going to be about 10, the ellipse is going to be about 10 pixels this big. And it's going to draw somewhere around here. So 100, 100, like right there. There it is, tiny ellipse. Okay, I'm going to add a 0 to the width and height because I want to show you something else that needs a larger shape. So we'll make it a little bit bigger. Now, I want to show you something that seems like it might not be really important, but it's really totally important. So I'm going to draw 3 ellipses. Interesting, you may say. Well, I'm going to comment out the third one. So this second ellipse, where is it? It's in the exact same spot as the other one. So if I were you, I would think about writing down what is going on here. So that's enough, really, to tell me what's up if I can't remember things, which is kind of a problem, you know. So this one is right underneath that. So I'm going to actually make this other ellipse kind of move down a little bit. So I'm going to put it at 150 y. Okay. Well, what do we notice about ellipse 2? I would notice, first of all, that ellipse 2 is on top of ellipse 1. If we wanted to reverse that, we could certainly move ellipse 2 up here, and now ellipse 2 is on the bottom. On the top, rather. I'm sorry. So let me change that back to where we were before, and let me just show you how this works. So what's going on here is that as we move down the code, it will basically stack things in Z space. So even though there is no Z space, there's like, it's just XY, right? There's no Z right now. We're in a two-dimensional rendering environment. There is a 3D rendering environment, which we will use, but we're not there yet. So this one, I could push this up to 200. And again, I'm going to get sort of this stacked effect. And if I want to take this whole unit and stack it in the opposite way, I can do that. I just have to kind of change a couple of things. First of all, I'd like it to not be right on top of what I just drew, so I'm going to change the x coordinate on these three shapes to move it over. So let's go ahead and do 300 and just see where that gets us. Okay, now they're both exactly the same. And so what I'm going to do is I'm literally going to code them in the opposite order. So the first one is going to go on the bottom, and the third one is going to go on the top. All right. Boom. Opposite order. So it's really, really kind of important to think about that. So because a lot of people forget, and then they're like, why can't I see my shape? Oh my God, why can't I see my shape? And I'm not saying that you would do that, but it's a common error, and it happens to me sometimes too. And the answer is, the problem is that you can't see your shape. Your shape is there, it's just underneath something else. So you want to really kind of think about that when you're, moving through some of these things. And it's really, in computer science, computer programming or computer science, it's, the order of execution, which in this visual environment would control the stacking. So in other words, if I were to come all the way down here, just to kind of like make this even more, and let's say, okay, I'll make this 200. I'll make this one 1. So the only reason why this one is drawing on top right now is because it's the last one executed. So what we're seeing here is that in all of this like stacking mumbo jumbo, the code is going to execute from the top down unless you tell it to do otherwise, which there are lots of ways that you can tell it to do something different. But I think it's really important to just kind of think about that and understand how that is working. So let's do a couple more things before we sign off here on, let's think about color for a quick second here. So we've got all these ellipses, and we could certainly give them a fill. So if we use the fill command, we could try something like, let's do 100 just to start. So now they're all gray. That's great. Real common question is, what if I don't want everything to be gray? Well, again, it's that sort of order of execution thing. So if you want to set the fill, if you set the fill up here, it's going to apply to everything underneath it until it's told otherwise. And how would it be told otherwise? In this case, it would be told otherwise with another fill statement. So here we could make another fill statement to kind of supersede the previous one, and we could make that one, oh, I don't know, how about, let's use an RGB color here. So now we have those great green circles. One thing that you can also do with a fill color, obviously this is going to be grayscale. And let's see, this is going to be so I gave a little bit of the game away. I said 4 values when there's only 3. I did that on purpose. So we want to add an alpha value. And an alpha value is really just that. If you think about alpha channels in Photoshop, an alpha value is a transparency or an opacity kind of parameter. So let's try like something low. Somehow I missed that completely. And as promised, the opacity right now is extremely low, so it's almost, I would say, barely there. I think we could certainly have more than that. There we go. So, yeah, other ways of doing things. You can have a lot of fun with transparency in p5.js. There's one other visual attribute on our ellipses that we haven't really controlled kind of a whole lot, and that would be the stroke. And so the stroke is basically the outline. So there's a couple of ways that you can deal with that. One way that I like to deal with it is just kind of globally. If you want the whole sketch to not have any strokes, up in the setup, you can use the no stroke command. And I'm pretty sure I might have spelled this wrong. Here we go. There we go. So that's what it looks like with no stroke. I'm not sure if I actually want no stroke here because it doesn't really illustrate the stacking very well. So I'm going to go back to having a stroke. But anyway, now you know. All right. So I'm going to spend a couple more minutes sort of thinking about ways that we could do something that would be kind of maybe a little bit exciting, okay? I think we've kind of mushed through some of the like very basics. And I do want to take a couple of minutes to just show you something that might like look kind of cool. So I'm going to take this group of ellipses, which is something that I do a lot, cut and paste and, you know, try it again. I'm going to stick it down here, and I'm going to need to move it away, you know, so it has kind of its own place. So I think I'm just going to add 1 to the the 100 of the y coordinate. Ah, did it again. See? Right. So, let's see. It looks like I'm missing one. Am I being dumb? It's possible. Yes, I am being dumb. So I think this should be actually 300. There we go. My goodness. Okay, great. So now we have this sort of second group of ellipses, and I think what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to make them move a little bit. Okay? So let's give them a jiggle. Jiggling is definitely one of the most fun things to do in code. So, all right, let's do this. So, how would we even think about making something jiggle? Well, it's got an XY location, right? So, let's see, I'll take my lip gloss here. This is at an XY location, right? Now, if it's jiggling, what is it doing? It's like, right? Just a tiny bit, tiny bit, tiny bit. Tiny, tiny bit. Well, what would happen if we took the X or Y values here and just added like some small random number? Ooh, let's find out. Okay, so let's see. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to address this coordinate. So, and I'm also going to put some white space here, and I'm just going to try to give myself some idea of what is working here. So when I come back to it, I don't know, there's no surprises about what's going on. Okay, so now I have ellipse equals 100. Well, how would I add random numbers to that? It's like inside this function, and I don't know. I mean, what do I do with it? Well, I'll tell you, this right here is just a number. You can do pretty much anything within this small little space. So what we can do is, just like in math class, we could add a little random number. And it just so happens that the random number, let's go between 0 and 3. And then I need another parentheses for closing it. Okay? So basically what I did was I took, this is just a function using the random function. And it's telling p5.js, find a random number between 0 and 3. And then it's saying add it to 100. So let's get that going and see. Oh, hey, that looks promising. A little bit of something there. So now this really just comes down to iterating. And by iterating, I mean repeating. So let's go ahead and put one in there. And then, of course, I need to update the parentheses. So the sort of rules for parentheses are exactly like they would be in math. And then, so we should be all set here, except for that double plus. And you can see they're actually jiggling differently because they're separate calls to random. Okay? So now, if I want to really get things going, I can add that random number to the y coordinate as well. And then, of course, I need my sort of extra parentheses. So I'm going to go ahead and just repeat this throughout the y coordinate. And get my end parentheses out there. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to show you today because we're going to take it one step further. We're going to make a variable. And actually, you know, never mind. I don't want to do that. But what I do want to do is I want to give my window a little bit more real estate here. And I think I want to move these just so they're a little bit like kicked over a little bit. So, and this is kind of not the smartest way to do this. There's a better way to do this, but we're going to talk about that in one of the following videos. So on the x coordinate, I'm just going to move it over like 100 pixels and see where that goes. That's a little bit clearer, easier to see. So what would happen, by the way, since we're not auto-refreshing, what would happen if instead of a random number between 0 and 3, we chose a random number between 0 and 30? I will show you. Let's implement that. Whoa! Yeah, much more jiggly. So, you know, you can kind of really play and have fun with, you know, these functions once you learn kind of how they work. And so what, you know, you may ask yourself, like, okay, it's moving. Like, how is it moving? It's moving because we're changing the XY coordinate actually with every frame, or you could also say it's changing over time. And that's how it creates the illusion of movement. So I think with that, I'm going to sign off on this video. Covered a lot. In the next video, we're going to talk about math stuff. We're going to start to play around with conditionals, like if-then statements, and other fun and interesting things. So I will see you all soon again here, and don't get too wrapped up with trying to code. Just play and try to make things work through trial and error. That's actually the sort of cornerstone of creative coding. So I'll talk to you again soon, and have a great week. Bye.